Hello and welcome to The Scaling Game. This is a podcast where we discuss how we've helped direct response advertisers find and fix what's preventing them from scaling their business. I'm Sammy Afrin. I'm the head of creative strategy at Deciphered. Alongside me in this episode and every other, you will see John Belcher. He is the founder of Deciphered. In today's episode, we are going to discuss how we helped a VSL health company decrease their CPAs by 50%, allowing them to profitably spend across 8 ad networks, ultimately acquiring tens of thousands of new customers a month. But before we jump into the specifics of this case study, I got to pause and ask you to please go watch the first episode of The Scaling Game if you've not seen it yet. This is a foundational episode that lays out the rules of the scaling game. Watching this will ensure that this case study and every other is as helpful to you as possible. So pause here, go watch it if you haven't. Otherwise, I'm zipping my lips and we're going to jump into the specifics of this case study. I will see you there. Okay, hello, John.
Hello.
We are talking VSL. We are talking health vertical. This is post iOS 14. Mm-hmm. Give us some more context. Let's dump into the skinny of this. What did this client come to you thinking their issue was? I'm assuming media buy, I'm assuming creative, but let's get some specifics so we can kind of talk our way into the numbers.
Yeah, this is a client that had been super successful for like 8-9 years with digital advertising through the VSL health vertical. They'd had an internal traffic team, was run, once again, kind of through iOS 14. They could do no wrong, right? Just printing money, platforms, what have you. Got to the point by the time we got in, and this is like not super far post iOS 14. Numbers had fallen off. Person who was running the team was in over their head, lost some people, and this was just kind of an opportunity. They needed someone to help pick up the traffic stuff. And so we came into this, picked stuff up. Meta was the number one platform that we were leveraging. Google actually wasn't really available with this. There was a bunch of policy issues. Yeah. So it was kind of one for me that there was a lot of things that we needed to learn to talk about how do we continue. They had multiple multiple SKUs, we'll call it.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of one of those things where we got to focus on our post iOS 14 process, leveraging our where, why, how, and then getting more into message stacking, platform diversification, et cetera.
Yeah.
It wasn't a nice to have. It was we have to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so that for me was one of these things where, once again, first time I'd ever run traffic straight to VSLs.
Yeah, same.
So the question was always like, will your process work? And I was like, I don't know, but it's
only one way to find out.
So we'll see. So
yeah.
That's kind of where we came into this. I didn't have benchmarks for the VSL portion. But the cool part was this is e-com after the VSL. And so we had pretty good understanding of the numbers that we need to be achieving on the back end.
Yeah.
With this particular product that we're talking about, their CPA target was about $75.
Yep.
We had taken some old creatives that had been running for a while, ramped them up to this point. And this is kind of where you and I dug in and said, all right, let's go through our process to figure out.
Yeah, we worked through what we were given, like what's missing. This is kind of, we haven't talked about this idea too much, but between our conversations between you and I, we often talk about how we differ from more traditional, I guess, conversion rate optimization type agencies, in the sense it's like the big question we find ourselves asking often, and oftentimes is the answer is like, what's missing? What isn't here that needs to be here? And that's ultimately, once we kind of had the lay of the land, we'd done what we could, we'd rebuilt what we could from the ad perspective. We had, given everything that we thought had legs at working again. We'd done all those things. So again, we'd shaken out all those tools, and it was like, okay, now we've got to get into the nitty gritty of it. So you do your magic, you go break down the funnel into the different steps, and we start looking at progression rates throughout this funnel. Let's talk about the specific the numbers, the equation, if you will, that kind of presented itself.
Yeah, so looking at the screen, the click costs for this client were and still are really inexpensive relative to other things that we've seen. So when you see 65 cents, like you're like, that was 4 years, like it's today, right?
No, for real. Yeah, honest.
And so they get really good click costs. most of the traffic goes straight to the VSL. Some of it goes through advertorials for native and stuff like that, but most of it just goes straight to the VSL. And so, 85% of people that clicked on an ad start the video. I wrote add to cart here above opt-in. At the end of the VSL, when they want to go add the product to cart, they have to do just an email opt-in.
Yeah.
And so that's why it says opt-in, but it's also just kind of treated like an add to cart. And then we have checkout, and then we have purchase, right? The hard one for me with this is when you sell through a 45-minute to an hour and 20-minute VSL, it's pretty hard to go, well, I think this is where we're breaking down in the thing that we need to do differently.
Yeah. It's like where in the message, like where in that 45 minutes is the issue? Like, and then don't even get started on the process of like reworking it.
Yeah. It's a long process, right?
Yeah.
And we're looking for faster wins.
Yeah.
And so that was that part for me. And I looked at this, I was like, okay, the opt-in rate, what we'll call the add to cart rate, was about 10%. It's not great, but after a 45-minute video.
Yeah, right. Honest. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what I don't know about that. Why don't we focus on what we do know, right? And so my concern as we looked at this, and just as a quick reference, this is the first time, like Sammy had worked with me historically as a media buyer. This was when she really moved into the creative strategy role. She'd worked through a couple other businesses kind of in between stints we worked together. But this is where I was like, I'm in more strategy, like offer client strategy now. I need someone else to handle creative strategy. And so this is where Sammy stepped in. And I looked at this and I was like, okay, add to cart rate is fine. It needs to be improved, but it's not terrible. But when we have 85 people that opted in and only 17 actually moved through the checkout process to go look at the credit card page.
Yeah.
For me, it was like, this number's fine and this number's fine. This is brutal, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when we say checkout, just to define this is like contact info field. So I think it was like email, phone.
Just email first, phone, and then just like
then like address.
Yeah, shipping information, yeah.
Right? So you're basically saying like, I'm ready to purchase this. I'm not at the point yet where I've given my credit card information.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what's really important here is this was the first time where I was like, Sammy, I got other stuff I got to work on. I'm telling you right now, this is what needs to get fixed. You go figure out like what you would recommend, and then we'll come back and figure out how to do this.
Yeah. So I had been on the brand side prior to this. Like I had stepped away from kind of working in the more like agency side of things. So I'd been really focused on just like where I worked for a brand and did all of their stuff for like the 2 years leading up to this point. So I was having an interesting reinvigoration of direct response marketing because I was like, what the hell is this VSL? Like you talking about, you'd never seen a VSL funnel. This is something I was like, there's no way, like just my, I guess call it being a millennial and like being internet literate, like whatever. I remember looking at this and being like, you're telling me there's been a business that's been built off for 10 years off of this. I couldn't believe, I was like, my flabber was gasted. Like I could not believe it. So you gave me some insight on the number side of things. Like, hey, it's, this checkout issue, like people are adding to cart, not checking out, like what, like, this is where you need to focus. What's the problem? So as we do with every client, I know my where. I start there, reverse engineer up the funnel, and you have to take off your marketer hat and you got to put on whomever your avatar is hat, and you got to go through it and try to remove all your bias from the process as you do it. And
I'm going to interrupt you there really quickly. I want to interrupt really quickly.
Yeah.
Part of this was Sammy said, I just want to get rid of the VSL and just go sell this through an e-commerce play, right? And so me fighting back was, okay, that's fine. We can add that to our long-term list of things to try, but we have to try and fix what's already here to see if we can make it better, right? Yeah. And I think it's important to talk that, like, I had to have you take off my Sammy hat of this is from me as a purchaser, consumer perspective, and just be like, my job's to be here in the business and figure out how to make this work quickly. Yeah. And so that was kind of where I think your discussion about taking off that hat as a marketer was really important.
It just became, sometimes we talk about a lot, seeing the forest through the trees, right? And that can be the case sometimes. I just remember sitting through this, and I cannot tell you how many times I went from ad to VSL. I'm like, what is it? What is it? I don't even know how many times I watched the VSL. And finally, I was like, you know what? I just felt really hung up on it. So I think I was home in West Virginia for whatever reason. I was visiting my grandparents, and I was like, okay, my grandma fits this demographic of person. Grandma, run through this with me. Like, what do you see here? And my grandma, like, I mean, she's not, like, she can use an iPhone, so she's not, like, like tech illiterate. But, I was like, Grandma, just, like, run through this with me. So we went, and she sat, and we watched the entire VSL together and whatever else. And then it got to the point of, like, checkout. And she was like, wait, what am I buying? Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? She's like, well, we just watched this whole, she's like, I just got so caught up in the story and all the education and the background in this VSL. And I got my head so much information that, like, what is it that I'm being asked to buy? And I was like, ding, 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 ding. Like that, the bell started ringing, and I don't even think I worded it to you necessarily, but I was just like, oh, okay, this does need, I kind of validated my opinion on it needing like the e-commerce experience. I was like, this needs a product page. Like this needs something so that after people spend 45 minutes watching a VSL, they have a refresher as to what it is they're even being asked to buy. So I go to John, I'm like, hey, John, I think this is the issue. I think we ended up calling it, I think the ecom page is what became like the naming convention. But I was like, this needs to have an old school product page. Like it needs to, I wanted to put some basically like a little, it was pretty salesy. It wasn't like a straightforward, just, here's the product, here's the information. It had some sales letter for sure influence on it, but we stuck and basically put together and then stuck it after the VSL, like to, to give it a test. And I mean, it worked really well. So, I mean, you want to put some more language to it. I'm trying to like read back, give it through your lens at the time. But this was the first time that I understood what you meant by we need to figure out something that's quick and impactful. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand how to necessarily like suture those things together until this moment.
Yeah. So one thing I want to cover before we dig into the results that this produced is you came to me with this idea and I was like, yep, makes total sense. Yeah. And then we took it to their team and they were like, wait, we've been doing this for 9 years and you want to lengthen our funnel. Why is that okay? And so I want to make sure it's very clear to people why we were okay justifying this.
Yeah.
We had 85 people
we're having
opting
the volume talk. Yeah.
And only 10% of those people ended up purchasing, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, we have plenty of people getting out of the VSL.
Yeah.
But so volume is not a problem through the VSL. It's
right.
This is where everyone is leaving in the purchase process. Mm-hmm. And so we may not see our like actual volume. We're really expecting our checkout and purchase rate to go up dramatically. We would go from 85 to like see a few fewer people drop off because there's one extra step. But the ratios of everything else moving through should improve dramatically. And so it was a little bit of a fight for me on the numbers side to get really successful direct response marketers to be like, why in the world would we add an extra page here?
But you get it. Again, like we always say, like the good businesses are the hardest to change. Especially, and I think I'm not exaggerating. I think I'd maybe been there for a week. Like when I don't think I'm exaggerating a bit. I think you have to learn to walk the line and respect a business that's made its mark, doing things how it's been done. But again, as what got you here doesn't get you there. So knowing that, I kind of had like your blessing. You kind of pled the case to the powers that be at the top of the food chain there. It was the implementation part was easy because they had a fantastic team, right? I literally just gave them my ideas as much as I could and said, guys, go build this and put it in place. So that part was easy, and we were not too involved in that beyond stitching the messaging together. And again, it wasn't anything special from a messaging perspective. It was literally just kind of like reframing what the VSL had said in here's what you said, now here's what you're buying because of what that said. That was basically it. So I don't remember how this test was implemented. Did we do A/B split test on Facebook, or did we swap like
Yeah, so we literally just URLs. On the back end, we had enough traffic coming through that we literally just rotated the traffic and we're like, holy crap, we saw the conversion rate double.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's important for me is this rate right here, literally 2x'd.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
By just adding in that page, we had 2 times the number of people enter their contact shipping information and then the same number of people complete. So I wrote here, out of 1,000 clicks, we had 8.5 purchases that went up to 17. and our CPA went from 76 down to 38, right? So this is just like, it wasn't world-changing strategy, but it was taking a good hard look at the numbers and saying, what do we need to implement here to create room in the math? And that's exactly what happened, right? So from a profitability perspective, like
check.
Big checks.
Double check.
And once again, they have a choice to either pocket it or redeploy it for volume.
We went volume.
Volume was absolutely their choice. Anything you want to add on that front?
No, again, I look back on all this now, and it's just like, these are confidence building things for me. So this is kind of like where I feel like you said it. It's like, oh, it was like my first win for me. So that was a big deal. We look at it from the profitability standpoint. It was business changing, and we're going to talk about the diversification of the funnel itself across other SKUs here in a sec. But the algorithm piece was easy. We had a very simplistic, media buying setup, but it was delivering the 50 conversions per ad set a day. So it didn't really matter. We were doubling down on that.
Now the only caveat I'll have with the algorithm is this worked phenomenally well, but as you're probably aware, health is extremely seasonal, right?
Yes.
And so this is that part where it's like during the year, basically like January through June.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Right? It's super high in January and then it comes down, but it's really good through June. Summer's kind of a dip. Back to school, there's a nice little uptick until like until like middle of October, and then boom down from there. And so that was the piece of this, is like, this worked really well, but it's also seasonality, right? And so I remember talking with the CFO, and he's like, well, we need to do twice the volume in November that we did in June. And I'm like, dude, that's not going to happen. Like, period, end of story. When you're looking at projecting this is never going to happen. And so that was that part for me of, we were doing all the right things on the media, buying all those components. We'll get into diversification, which was massive.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really important to understand of like, we don't get to just point volume and CPA and here's what we're looking for. This was the thing for me with this client, was like, there's business planning for sales, and there's like understanding paid traffic.
And there's like reality. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was a very interesting exercise. But anyway, go ahead.
No, the diversification piece of this, again, this was multifold, because there was most definitely a message stacking component of the diversification. There was a SKU component, and then there was definitely a platform component as well. So this hits all three of the areas that we look for in diversification. From the messaging standpoint, I think it wasn't so much necessarily messaging in this offer that was what our diversification was. I think the diversification here actually came more through ad styles and less of ad message, because the messaging worked. Like we never really had to question in this space. And what we were talking about, the continuity mattered. It had to be one-to-one. The messaging wasn't ever something we had to play with too much. But as we know, any ad algorithm really prefers novelty. So what we had to start being really good at was diversifying how we were displaying that same message. So we could basically sell the same message. We came up with all these crazy little, what did we call it? The Canva mini VSLs. We had like all these crazy little videos that we started to just experiment with. Hey, like, how can we quickly and efficiently put together stuff that works? Because they had an in-house creative team and things like that, but that was slow. So we started allocating our own creative team, to kind of be able to up the speed of production and up the value of production. So that was a big, I guess, shift in perspective where, okay, the message works. That's not the problem. How do we diversify it anyways? And I thought in this instance, this was through, again, the style of image or style of ad, image, video, different types of videos, talking head versus VSL. But there's a lot of different ways we could talk about that. From a SKU perspective, this same funnel, I would probably had a big three, maybe a good way to put it, right? The first one we tackled was their biggest, what was their most, or no, I guess it wasn't actually, it became their biggest after this optimization. But then because of the wins that were the lift that this optimization as far as implementing the product page after the VSL provided, we went and added that literally like copy and paste, except for the other product, into the other two product funnels. And not as big of lifts, but also wins, also beat out 10-year-old funnels. So not only we went and took the same strategic approach of reinforcing, hey, here's what you're buying. Because again, I think they all, like you said, I think one of them was over an hour long. Like these were long videos. These were not, unless you were interested in the topic, they weren't easy to sit through videos. So we always just took that same approach of, okay, the message is then being reinforced in the VSL. Now, hey, you watch this long VSL. Here's what we're asking you to do. That was it. Simple formula. When implemented that, again, made a massive difference across their business. And then from a platform perspective, I was less in the media buying at this time. So, John, you're maybe a little bit more adept just as far as memory and talking about how we diversified across platforms. I know Facebook was always our number one, but there was definitely a big native. We started doing some really little. This is when we started doing ad networks I never even heard of. I was like, what the hell is Locker Dome?
Yeah, so we got to the point where we were running 11 ad networks, 8 were hitting our CPAs, and another 3 were close. And ironically, I've been a YouTube guy since I started doing this. YouTube didn't perform very well for them. And that was always really interesting for me. It was the only thing that could get approved on Google. But we had Facebook. Bing was a really big producer, like tons of volume and profitability. And then we had all types of native networks. You know, we had a bunch of different things that we were working on at all times. And we had 8 that were hitting our targets and another 3 that were close. And if we were in a good time, those could continue to run, right? And so it's just something for me that it really showed me that sales is sales. And if you're making the math work in one area and you have an offer that can appeal to people, media buying on Locker Dome and Taboola, Locker Dome's now called Decide, but like they're not fundamentally that different, right? And so if you're advertising on this social network and that social network, all of these different things, like it's not super complicated. If you make it about the math and you make the math work, yeah, you have to know about media buying. You have to understand pixel setup and tracking and templates and you know, what you need to optimize for and placement trimming and all of those things.
Right.
I'm not trying to make it sound easy, but you're not going to make the numbers work doing that stuff.
Right.
You have to make the numbers work and then do that.
And then do that
right?
stuff.
Right?
100%.
And so I think to go back towards diversification, we had processes like we started using AI voiceovers for the videos to get more things produced more quickly. Yeah. Different styles of videos, images. As Sammy
so we integrated with Be Creatives for the first time, and there's still people that we use to this day. This is really a lot of seeds of things that have grown into really gigantic parts of our process now. You know, like I didn't even think about that.
Totally. And another piece for me that's really important about this is where we started doing contribution margin per order and making sure that the way the CPAs were set, we were actually, this business is really built off LTV. So we could acquire customers at what they were looking for. And by the time the first rebill happened, that they were actually making money, right? It was a big initiative for them on how much can we afford to spend so that by our first rebill, we're break even across all of our traffic. That was a huge reporting challenge for me. Yeah. But man, did I now know how to do incredible stuff with SQL and pipelines and all types of things.
Yeah, this is where the dashboards started to present themselves. This is kind of like our origins. Like everything's been an origin story. But this is, like I said in the beginning, this is where everything started to kind of really coalesce into like a bigger picture of, oh, this isn't just about paid traffic anymore. This is actually now about business. We're talking about running people's businesses. Like that's a big deal, you know. But you only get to see that again when you only get to really have even the opportunity to have that level of impact once you have the trust and tenure with a client, right? You don't get to really come in and get to have the opportunity to explore those avenues and make those kind of changes and create those opportunities until you prove yourself in the smaller ways first, right? So this client is a really fantastic example of compounding wins over time that ultimately just led to us being a business impacting entity for them. Like, you know, a really beautiful thing.
Agreed. So let's go over here to the scaling ladder, and I just want to kind of dig into what this process looked like. So when we started here, this is their checkout issue, right?
Yep.
And so this is where Sammy ideated this e-com page test.
Shout out to Grammy.
Yep. Big win, right? Thanks, Grandma. Moved us up here, ramped things up, kind of hit a scaling plateau, right? We'd eaten up all the wins, and really this came down to spend. That's what this is about. We just increased spend on what was working.
Yep.
And then we came here, and now we talk about, so this is like messaging, ads,
Yeah.
We focused on making more ads and messages, right? Kind of rode those as far as we could. Got to here, and now this was SKUs, right? So we'd had this working on one SKU, primarily things that were taking place on Facebook. So we said, hey, our quickest win is going to be let's leverage this with our other SKUs to make our other campaigns more profitable. Boom, went from there. And then finally we came into this. And so we were only on Facebook. And I wouldn't say only, but Facebook primarily.
Yeah.
And then now we were on more platforms, right? And so this was something where we were managing millions of dollars a year in spend for these guys. It's not what they were doing pre-iOS 14, but it's still way more than what they were doing in the prior months to us getting there. And they actually had a program that could be leveraged to go through and continue to scale things. And that's for me what was so important is all of these things were built one after the next, after the next, after the next, that allowed them, what Sammy didn't mention is they had the big 3 offers at the time. They launched a new supplement funnel using this same setup. That's their number one producer right now. And so that's just that part for me of like, that's that part of working through these components to continue to make this work, to produce profit, to grow the business. Those are some of the things that are super important that kind of took place in this process. So Sammy, anything that you want to discuss on this scaling ladder?
On the scaling ladder? No, again, I think this is a beautiful example, a literally drawn example, written example of how it's never just one thing. Like one thing can make a massive difference, right? We've discussed several episodes now how typically it's one gigantic thing and a bunch of other small things. Don't make the mistake of only trying to make big things happen. Little things matter. And little things typically happen more frequently than the big things. You know what I mean? If you get one big thing a year and 15 small things a year, they might be pretty close to equal over the course of, the compounding of the wins. So I hesitate. I think oftentimes, because you get such a dopamine kick from it, you're always trying to look for like these gigantic wins. And it's like, no, take a step back. Appreciate the small wins too. Realize that it all contributes to an overall better business,
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that I want to add to what you just talked about is this is really for me kind of where the onus, you look at all these things that we did that were really successful. I talked about the CFO, and this was kind of the first time for me where I was like, I need to be able to come with data here to help people can understand what real sales projections are going to look like, right?
Yeah.
And so despite all of these awesome things that we did, if we look at the year, this is kind of how the sales volume works. So let's call this this is June, right? And then we have this big summer lull, and then we have September, and then it goes up for a little bit, and then there's just like this, right?
Right.
This is consumer demand, conversion rates, and costs are directly associated with this. So if you make all of these optimizations happen, I'm just going to use a green one, and we'll talk about percentages. This is still how your sales are going to look.
Right. They're
going to go up, but for some reason, people have this expectation that it's like, well, we're just going to look like this.
Yeah, right.
Or like that.
Right. I was going to say, I think more people would seem to think that they're just going to hockey stick, but no.
Yeah, keep growing. And what's important for me is if you're a brand new company, you may be able to overcome seasonality in your first year. Awesome. But what's important to understand, this is why we really focused on, when we talk about how our system has evolved, moving into cost planning, I want to make sure that our clients understand what is your year going to look like.
Right.
Because if you're trying to do, like when we talk here, let's say this is November, December, you might do 5% of your volume here. But this is also 16% of the time. You have to do 95% of your projections in the first 84% of the year. And so this is just what's become really, really important for us is having the ability to do cost planning so you can really understand what needs to take place here. And this is where this seed was planted for me on how does this need to work? Because despite all the awesome things we did, there still was what Sammy and I love to talk about is we don't manage ads, we don't manage campaigns, we manage expectations, right? This for me was the first time where I was like, I need to be able to come to the table and help companies understand no matter what we're doing, this is what you can expect from a performance perspective based off the current state of the business. And this ultimately for me is why we broke up, is because I was like, they want to achieve something that's just not going to be doable.
But this projections process over the course of the year, the cost planning process has in the last, we'll use the last 2 months, isn't it? Right. It's November. We're a week from Thanksgiving in 2024, right? So like if you're in e-com, you're bare knuckling right now, getting ready to grind it out. Or if you're a Q1 business, like you're kind of getting ready to hunker down and just wait it out, So it's like in having the guidance of the cost planning and the seasonality taken into account for what we're doing from a work management perspective over the course of not only a week, a month, but a year has been invaluable, right? Because now instead of trying to create sales out of thin air in a market that's just not going to support it with economics that just are not supported by the current costs of the market, I just get to focus on building out a fucking stellar creative repository so we're hitting the ground running come January 1. Again, pulling back from this is just paid traffic. This is just Facebook ad. It's like okay, if Facebook ads is like your hometown, right? Like we're now up and we're like the International Space Station now, right? Like we've pulled up from the city level to the state level to all these different things, and we're just looking at things so holistically now that when people ask me what I do, I can't really I don't feel like I can any longer say like paid traffic. It's like, I feel like I do like biz dev half the time. It's really interesting work we're doing now, and I think it's because again we're coming into a time where if you have a business, your business exists online, and therefore this stuff is relevant to you. That's it.
Yeah, and once again, this is a process to me that once again we want to be math driven. What I'm really excited about is we've had a discussion with our number one client over the last couple of days of what's more important to you right now, volume or cost. We can't have both. And so we've been going back and forth on this discussion, and I keep hearkening back. I told you in September that this is what the CPAs were going to look like in November. And this is why we need to have these discussions beforehand, is like we have to be prepared for this, because if you need volume, that's fine, but this is what it's going to cost. And if you want cost, this is the volume you can expect. And so those are just things for me that we continue to evolve and grow and get better. We're not running ads. We're running customer acquisition programs for companies that can help them predict what they're going to be able to sell and how things are going to work. That's really what's important to me.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, we've really given visual to what has seemed like such a black box for the last 10 years. You know what I mean? Like we figured out a way through this process and through not only like the projections within the business as far as what you can expect and the the incremental changes you can do, or your incremental improvement type of projections, but also like the cost. It's just everything has now just again coalesced into like this pretty package with a bow on it, where we can now confidently sit here and say to you guys, you need to try this. It will work for your business. Like at least if the numbers work. I just feel fully confident in that. So this, John, was a good one. They're all good. Who are we kidding? But
why don't you guys tell if this was good, right?
Yeah. How about that's what I was gonna say.
Sometimes we get to drink our own Kool-Aid, and I like sharing what we do with people. So I hope if anyone's still watching this, you found this valuable. What's important to me is if you can let us know, are you finding value in this? What are the parts that are most important to you? Do you like our side tangents, or is it just give me the brass tacks and get out of here? That would be helpful for us to get back.
Yeah, again, guys, we're doing it for the sake of education, for the sake of bettering ourselves, hopefully bettering your businesses, and we're trying to make the content itself better in the process. So please like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks.
See ya. Oh, my. Thank you so much for watching The Scaling Game. John and I know that time is your most valuable currency, so we do not take your attention lightly. If you could do us a solid and drop a comment below, letting us know what you loved, what you hated, whatever it is, leave the comment so that we can read that comment and then go and use it to inform our future content. We appreciate that as well. If you have interest in working with the team at Deciphered, you can head on over to deciphered.com. That's Deciphered with a Y. Fill out the lead form, and then we will reach out to you to schedule a feasibility assessment. Outside of that, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you in the next one.